The beta compared her to her cousin in public, but the Alpha King ignored every lady and marked her. The lonely Alpha King had built walls around his heart until one woman showed him that isolation wasn't strength. It was death. But his enemies knew how to destroy a king who dared to love, threaten the woman who made him vulnerable. As siege engines surrounded his castle, Aldric faced the ultimate test. What price would a king pay to protect the woman who taught him that love multiplies strength instead of destroying it? Chapter 1. The Crown's Weight. Dawn crept through Raven's Hollow Castle's stained glass windows, painting the war room in crimson hues that reminded Alpha King Aldric Blackthorn of blood spilled in battles past. He stood before ancient maps, studying border territories while his advisors slept, grateful for these solitary moments when duty's crushing weight felt almost bearable. 31 years old, 7 ruling alone. The crown had claimed his father in the Northern Wars, leaving Aldric to command a realm he barely understood. Every decision rippled through thousands of lives, approving trade routes, settling territorial disputes, maintaining delicate peace between human settlements and Lycan territories. Politics demanded constant vigilance against those who viewed his youth as weakness worth exploiting. Marriage proposals arrived weekly from neighboring kingdoms, each accompanied by detailed political advantages and economic incentives. Duchesses, princesses, wealthy merchants' daughters, all paraded before him like livestock at market, their fathers calculating dowries while their mothers coached perfect curtsies. Aldric rejected them mechanically, claiming the kingdom required his undivided attention. Truth whispered differently in quiet moments. The crown had become his fortress, protecting him from connections that might compromise judgment or reveal vulnerabilities enemies could exploit. Love was luxury kings couldn't afford. His tutors had drilled that lesson deep during childhood marked by assassination attempts and political betrayals. His wolf stirred restlessly beneath human skin, yearning for something beyond strategy sessions and diplomatic ceremonies. The beast understood loneliness in ways that transcended rational thought, recognizing emptiness that no amount of power could fill. Yet acknowledging such needs felt dangerous, almost treasonous to everything he'd been taught about leadership. Footsteps echoed through corridors as servants began morning routines. Soon, advisors would arrive bearing new crises requiring immediate attention. Border skirmishes with rogue Lycans, grain shortages threatening winter supplies, trade disputes that could escalate into conflicts requiring military intervention, endless challenges that consumed every waking hour. But first, blessed silence. Moments when Aldric could simply exist without performing the role of infallible monarch. Here, surrounded by maps marking territories won through blood and sacrifice, he allowed himself brief glimpses of what might have been different. Perhaps in another life, he could have chosen connection over isolation, companionship over solitude. The sun climbed higher, signaling duty's inevitable return. Whatever dreams haunted these quiet hours would soon disappear beneath responsibilities that defined his existence. The kingdom needed its king strong, decisive, untouchable. Yet something deep within yearned for more. Chapter 2. The library discovery midnight found Aldric prowling castle corridors like a caged predator, unable to find rest despite exhaustion that weighed heavy on his shoulders. Sleep brought dreams filled with political machinations and distant battles, offering little respite from waking responsibilities. Tonight felt different. Restless energy demanded movement through familiar passages where ancestors had walked before him. His private library beckoned from the tower's highest level, sanctuary filled with ancient texts chronicling kingdom histories and military strategies. Here, surrounded by leather-bound wisdom, he often discovered clarity that eluded him during chaotic daylight hours. Knowledge became refuge when leadership felt overwhelming. Pushing open heavy oak doors, he expected solitude. Instead, candlelight flickered across delicate features bent over thick volumes spread across his personal reading table. Dark hair cascaded like silk curtains, framing a face marked by intense concentration. She held a treatise on siege warfare, reading with genuine fascination rather than polite interest. Lady Alara Thornfield, minor nobleman's daughter who served occasionally at court functions. He'd noticed her before, quiet presence hovering at ceremony edges while other ladies competed for attention through elaborate gowns and practiced charm. This woman chose shadows, observing rather than performing. "You read battle tactics for pleasure?" His voice startled her, causing parchment to flutter between trembling fingers. "Your Majesty." She scrambled upright, nearly overturning the candle. "Forgive me, I didn't expect that I might visit my own library?" Amusement colored his tone despite initial irritation. Most ladies prefer romantic poetry to military history. Color bloomed across her cheeks. "I find warfare fascinating. Strategy, logistics, the psychology behind victory and defeat. These campaigns shaped our kingdom's current borders." Intelligence sparkled in violet eyes that met his without flinching. No simpering submission or calculated flirtation, just honest curiosity about subjects most courtiers found tedious. Her passion for learning stirred something unexpected within his chest. Recognition of kindred spirit who sought knowledge beyond social requirements. "Which battle interests you most?" He moved closer, drawn by her enthusiasm. "Thornwick Pass. Your father's tactical brilliance turned certain defeat into legendary victory." Her voice carried genuine admiration, not political flattery. Dangerous territory. This woman saw beyond crown and title, recognizing the man beneath royal obligations. Such connections led to complications he couldn't afford. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally. "These chambers are restricted." Pain flickered across her features before she gathered scattered books. "Of course. My apologies." As she departed, leaving only rose-scented air and disturbed dust motes, Aldric realized something fundamental had shifted. The library felt emptier now, silence somehow diminished by her absence. Chapter 3. The 3-Year Watch. 3 years. Aldric counted each month since that midnight encounter transformed routine existence into something far more complex. He'd forbidden her return to the library, yet found himself creating excuses to observe Lady Alara during court functions, state dinners, and ceremonial gatherings. What began as idle curiosity had evolved into obsession he couldn't rationalize or eliminate. She moved through castle halls like morning mist, present yet ethereal, contributing thoughtful observations during rare council meetings where her father's minor status granted attendance. While other nobles schemed for advancement, she listened intently, offering insights that demonstrated remarkable understanding of complex political situations. Her mind impressed him more than beauty or wealth ever could. His wolf approved completely, recognizing something precious that human logic struggled to define. The beast stirred whenever she appeared, practically purring when diplomatic duties placed them in proximity. During winter festivals, he'd watched her dance with younger courtiers, jealousy burning through him like wildfire whenever another man's hands touched her waist. This attraction violated everything he'd learned about kingship. Emotional attachments created vulnerabilities enemies could exploit. Personal desires compromised judgment required for effective leadership. Successful monarchs maintained distance from subjects, treating all relationships as political arrangements serving kingdom interests rather than individual needs. Yet knowledge couldn't diminish fascination. Her laugh during informal gatherings sounded like music after endless hours of political maneuvering. Intelligence gleamed behind violet eyes that held secrets he longed to discover. She treated servants with genuine kindness, discussed philosophy with visiting scholars, and demonstrated grace under pressure that spoke of hidden strength. Marriage proposals continued arriving from neighboring kingdoms, each offering strategic advantages that advisors praised enthusiastically. Aldric rejected them automatically now, making excuses about timing or diplomatic complications. The truth remained locked away. No woman could compare to the one he'd forbidden himself to pursue. Dangerous thoughts circled like vultures during quiet moments. What if he chose personal happiness over political necessity? What if he pursued connection despite risks? What if love mattered more than strategic alliances built on convenience rather than compatibility? Tonight brought news that would test every resolution he'd built against temptation. the Harvest Moon Festival approached, a traditional celebration where unmarried nobles gathered hoping to attract royal attention. Lady Alara would attend, and custom demanded participation from all court families. His wolf howled silent approval, while human reason whispered warnings. 3 years of denial had only strengthened desire rather than diminishing it. How much longer could he resist what his soul craved? The festival would prove everything. Chapter 4. The festival begins. Ravenshallow's Great Hall blazed with autumn splendor as noble families arrived for the Harvest Moon Festival, their carriages clattering across cobblestones while servants rushed to accommodate guests from across the northern kingdoms. Tapestries depicting ancient victories adorned stone walls, golden candlelight reflected off polished armor displays, and musicians tuned instruments for evening revelries that would continue until dawn. Aldric surveyed the gathering from his elevated throne, crown heavy upon his brow as he performed the eternal dance of kingship. Smile at appropriate moments, nod acknowledgement to visiting dignitaries, project strength and stability, while internally calculating political implications of every conversation unfolding below. The burden never lessened, only grew familiar through repetition. Lady Vivienne Ashford commanded attention near the hall's center, golden hair perfectly arranged around features that sculptors would immortalize in marble. Her crimson silk gown cost more than most families earned yearly, cut to emphasize assets that had captured numerous suitors' interests. She laughed prettily at some courtier's jest, movements calculated to draw masculine appreciation while maintaining proper decorum. Other ladies competed similarly, jewels sparkling like captured starlight as they positioned themselves strategically throughout the hall. Parents whispered encouragement, reminding daughters that catching royal attention could elevate entire family fortunes. Marriage to the Alpha King represented the ultimate prize in noble society's endless game of advancement and influence. His gaze searched relentlessly until violet eyes appeared near the hall's periphery. Lady Alara wore simple emerald silk that complemented her dark hair beautifully, though the gown's modest design suggested limited resources compared to wealthier families. She stood alone, observing festivities with quiet dignity rather than participating in competitive displays surrounding her. 3 years of denial crystallized into a single moment of perfect clarity. Every other woman faded into background noise as his wolf recognized its mate despite human resistance. She belonged here, beside him, sharing burdens and joys that kingship brought. Political considerations crumbled before emotion too powerful to ignore longer. Beta Marcus Blackwood approached the dais, wine heavy on his breath and malicious gleam brightening his eyes. "Magnificent gathering, Your Majesty. So many lovely prospects eager for royal consideration." "Indeed." Aldric's response carried a distraction he couldn't quite conceal. "Though some ladies understand court expectations better than others," Marcus continued with a predatory smile. "Breeding shows, doesn't it? Proper education, refined mannerisms, appropriate presentation. These qualities distinguish true nobility from mere pretension." Warning bells chimed through Aldric's consciousness. The beta's tone suggested trouble brewing, attention focused toward Alara's position with calculating precision. Whatever Marcus planned, it involved the woman Aldric had spent 3 years trying desperately to forget. The evening's first test approached. Chapter 5. The Public Humiliation. The beta's voice cut through musical harmony like blade through silk, deliberately pitched to carry across conversations and draw maximum attention. "Lady Alara, perhaps you might benefit from observing your cousin's exemplary deportment." Silence rippled outward from Marcus's position, spreading through the great hall, as nobles turned to witness whatever entertainment their host provided. Aldric's hands clenched the throne's armrests until knuckles whitened, muscles coiling like springs as he recognized the trap being laid before his eyes. "Behold Lady Vivienne's perfect posture." Marcus gestured theatrically toward the golden-haired beauty, whose practiced smile never wavered despite sudden scrutiny. Notice her elegant gestures, refined speech, magnificent presentation. These qualities distinguish noble ladies worthy of elevated attention. Heat climbed Alara's neck as whispers spread like wildfire through the gathered crowd. Every eye focused upon her simple gown, modest jewelry, unpowdered complexion that spoke of natural beauty rather than artificial enhancement. The comparison struck deliberately at insecurities any woman might harbor when placed beside acknowledged court beauty. Perhaps, Marcus continued with malicious pleasure, if certain individuals spent less time buried in dusty manuscripts and more effort learning proper feminine accomplishments, they might achieve similar grace. Dancing masters exist for good reason, as do seamstresses capable of creating appropriate court attire. Cruel laughter punctuated his observations from sycophants eager to curry favor through public cruelty. The attack revealed calculated precision, designed to destroy Alara's reputation, while elevating Vivian's prospects through direct comparison. Politics disguised as social commentary, wielding shame like a weapon against women whose only crime involved existing outside traditional expectations. Aldric's wolf raged against human constraints, demanding immediate retaliation against those who dared wound their mate. Alpha instincts screamed for protection, dominance assertion, violent response to threat against chosen mate. The beast cared nothing for political ramifications or diplomatic consequences, only for eliminating danger to what belonged rightfully to them. Yet kingship demanded measured responses, careful consideration of consequences before acting. Intervention would reveal feelings he'd hidden carefully for 3 years, exposing vulnerabilities enemies could exploit. Personal desires conflicted with royal obligations in ways that threatened everything he'd built. Alara stood frozen beneath scrutiny, dignity intact, despite humiliation burning across her features. Pride held her spine straight while tears threatened to spill, courage battling mortification in a public arena where retreat meant defeat. She faced judgment alone, undefended against cruelty designed to break spirits and crush dreams. The moment crystallized into a choice that would define everything afterward. Duty warred against desire, political wisdom against protective fury, calculated distance against desperate need to claim what his soul recognized as essential for survival. 3 years of denial shattered like glass before unstoppable force. Time for consequences. Chapter 6. The choice made enough. The single word emerged with authority that had commanded armies across the northern territories, silence descending like winter frost across the great hall's opulent expanse. Every conversation ceased. Every laugh died, every whisper vanished as alpha power filled the space between stone walls that had witnessed countless moments of historical significance. Aldric rose from his throne with predatory grace, crown-catching torchlight as he descended marble steps that separated monarchy from subjects. 7 years of absolute rule had taught him how words could cut deeper than swords, how presence could dominate without violence, how kings could remake reality through will alone. The crowd parted before him like wheat before scythe, nobles bowing automatically as their sovereign approached the epicenter of brewing conflict. Marcus's face drained color as he realized his entertainment had attracted unwanted attention. Cruel amusement transforming into nervous apprehension at royal displeasure suddenly focused upon him. "You dare," Aldric continued with deadly quietness that promised consequences beyond imagination. "Compare my mate to another woman in my presence at my festival before my court." Gasps echoed off vaulted ceilings as the word mate struck assembled nobles like lightning bolt. 3 years of speculation about royal marriage prospects had just been answered in the most unexpected manner possible. The minor lord's daughter everyone had overlooked stood revealed as chosen queen of the northern kingdoms. Your mate?" Marcus stammered, political calculations crumbling as he grasped implications of mistake beyond redemption. "But she's nobody special, just nobody special?" Aldric's voice carried a promise of violence held barely in check. "The woman who speaks 4 languages fluently? Who spent winter plague months treating sick people when other ladies planned wardrobes? Who understands military strategy better than half my generals?" Each declaration struck like a physical blow against those who had dismissed Alara as insignificant. 3 years of observation had catalogued every kindness, every intelligence displayed, every moment that proved her worth beyond shallow metrics used by court society. Knowledge became a weapon against ignorance. She reads ancient texts that help govern this kingdom, he continued, advancing until Marcus retreated against a decorative pillar. She treats servants with respect, offers insights during council meetings, carries herself with dignity that needs no crown for validation. Finally, his gaze found violet eyes wide with shock and wonder. She possesses the most beautiful mind I've ever encountered, and will be my queen. Without hesitation, he crossed the remaining distance and cupped her face with hands that had never known such gentleness. You don't have to accept, he murmured for her ears alone. But I've waited 3 years for courage to claim what my wolf has known since that midnight in my library. You've been watching me? She whispered. Watching you? Alara, you're the only woman I've ever truly seen. Then his lips found hers, sealing their fate before God and witnesses. Chapter 7. The aftermath chaos erupted through the great hall like wildfire through dry autumn leaves. Shocked exclamations, heated whispers, and stunned silences created a cacophony of political ramifications as nobles processed the evening's unprecedented events. 3 kingdoms' worth of marriage negotiations had just been obliterated by their sovereign's impulse. Alliances built over years crumbling in moments. Aldric felt the mate bond snap into place with devastating intensity, wolf-howling triumph as sacred connection forged between souls destined for unity. Every nerve ending buzzed with new awareness of Alara's emotions, her shock, wonder, fear, and growing acceptance flowing between them like a shared heartbeat. The marking had begun, supernatural claiming that declared her his before divine and mortal witnesses. "Guards!" he commanded, voice cutting through disorder with practiced authority. "Escort Lady Alara to the royal chambers immediately. No one follows without my explicit permission." Silver-armored warriors stepped forward, forming protective barriers around their future queen, while scandalized nobles pressed closer, desperate for additional details about transformation reshaping kingdom politics. Vivian's perfect composure finally cracked, tears streaking powder as her elevated prospects dissolved. Marcus had vanished entirely, probably fleeing before royal wrath descended upon him properly. "Your Majesty," Lord Chancellor Thorne approached cautiously, an ancient face grave with concern. "Perhaps we should discuss the implications later." Aldric's tone brooked no argument. "Clear the hall. Send our guests to their chambers. Cancel remaining festivities. But the diplomatic consequences will be addressed tomorrow." His gaze never left Alara as guards guided her toward private stairs leading to royal quarters. "Tonight I have more pressing concerns." The connection between them pulsed stronger with proximity, Wolf eager to complete claiming properly away from public scrutiny. 3 years of denial had only intensified desires now given free rein to explore possibilities previously forbidden. Every political consideration faded beneath the primitive need to ensure his mate's safety and comfort. Lord Thorne's disapproval radiated like winter chill, decades of diplomatic experience calculating costs of emotional decisions. The neighboring kingdoms sent representatives specifically hoping for marriage alliances. This public rejection will have consequences. Then they'll learn to adapt. Aldric's voice carried finality that ended debate. "My choice is made." As he followed guards and his chosen mate from the Great Hall, leaving behind shocked nobles and shattered expectations, one certainty burned through his consciousness. The isolated king who had ruled through duty alone was gone forever. In his place stood a man willing to risk everything for love. The real test would be whether the kingdom could survive such transformation, whether she would accept what he offered, whether choosing heart over strategy would prove wisdom or catastrophic folly. But doubt couldn't penetrate joy flooding his soul as a mate bond strengthened with every step toward their shared future. Chapter 8. Private Moments. The royal chambers had never felt more sanctuary than now. Thick oak doors sealed against outside pressures, while tapestries muffled sounds of continuing chaos from the great hall below. Aldric dismissed guards with curt gestures, needing privacy for conversations that would determine their future together. Candlelight painted golden warmth across familiar spaces, suddenly transformed by another's presence. Ilara stood beside tall windows overlooking the moonlit courtyard, emerald silk catching flamelight as she processed events that had changed everything within heartbeats. Her reflection in dark glass showed wonder warring with uncertainty, mind probably racing through implications of sudden elevation from overlooked noble to queen designate. "Regrets already?" he asked softly, approaching with careful steps that wouldn't startle someone still adjusting to a new reality. Shock, more than regret. Her voice carried steadiness despite trembling hands. 3 years of pretending you didn't notice me, and now, I noticed everything. The admission felt like removing armor worn too long. Every book you read, every kindness shown to servants, every intelligent observation during council meetings. You haunted my thoughts when sleep wouldn't come, inspired decisions when wisdom felt inadequate. She turned from window contemplation, violet eyes searching his face for deception. Then why forbid me from the library? Why maintain such distance? Because kings aren't supposed to choose with their hearts. Honesty tasted bitter after years of political calculation. Emotional attachments create vulnerabilities enemies exploit. Personal desires compromise judgment required for effective leadership. I was taught that love makes rulers weak. And now? Now I understand that living without love makes rulers hollow. He moved closer, drawn by a magnetic pull that had tormented him through countless sleepless nights. 3 years of denial only proved how essential you've become. The kingdom survived my emotional distance, but I barely did. Wonder bloomed across her features like sunrise after endless winter. You really chose me over all those princesses and duchesses. I chose you over everything. The words carried the weight of absolute truth. Titles, treaties, territorial alliances, none of it mattered when Marcus threatened your dignity. My wolf wouldn't tolerate attacks against its mate. Your mate. She tested the word like foreign language, savoring implications that transformed her entire existence. What does that mean exactly? Everything. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining with natural ease despite 3 years of imposed separation. Partnership in ruling, shared burdens and joys, children who will inherit the throne built on love rather than political convenience. The mate bond hummed stronger between them, supernatural connection promising depths of intimacy beyond normal human relationships. She would feel his emotions as he felt hers, strength shared rather than guarded separately, 2 souls merged into something greater than individual parts. The nobles seemed upset, she observed with understatement worthy of courtly diplomacy. They'll adapt or find new kingdoms to infest with their schemes. You matter more than their wounded expectations. With those words, years of loneliness finally began healing. Chapter 9. The first threat dawn brought unwelcome reality crashing through romantic euphoria as urgent knocking shattered peaceful moments stolen from kingdom duties. Lord Chancellor Thorne's voice carried through heavy doors with news that promised headaches lasting weeks rather than hours. Your Majesty, immediate consultation required. Diplomatic crisis developing. Aldric rose reluctantly from beside sleeping Ilara, pulling robes around shoulders still marked by her gentle touches. The mate bond hummed contentment even as political instincts awakened to face consequences of choosing heart over strategy. Some prices demanded payment regardless of emotional justification. "Speak freely," he commanded upon opening doors to reveal Thorne's grim expression and stack of correspondence that grew throughout night hours. "How severe is the damage?" 3 kingdoms have recalled their marriage proposals with extreme prejudice, Thorne reported without softening harsh reality. King Roderick of Westmarch claims insult to his daughter's honor requires immediate apology and substantial compensation. The Valdris Empire threatens trade sanctions unless you reconsider your impulsive decision. Most concerning, Prince Matthias of Drakemore suggests your emotional instability makes you unfit for alliance negotiations. Each revelation struck like a physical blow against his chest. Years of careful diplomacy had been shattered by single evening's choice. Relationships built through patient negotiation now requiring reconstruction from positions of weakness. Personal happiness extracted political prices that extended far beyond royal chambers. Intelligence reports also suggest coordination between these responses, Thorne continued gravely. Someone organized this reaction too quickly for coincidence. Your enemies are capitalizing on perceived vulnerability. Vulnerability? Aldric's voice carried a dangerous edge that made seasoned diplomats step backward. Since when does claiming one's mate constitute weakness? Since politics replaced passion as the basis for royal marriages. Thorne's brutal honesty reflected decades of experience navigating treacherous waters between kingdoms. They see emotional decision-making where they expected calculated alliances. Fear makes them aggressive. Then they'll learn the difference between emotion and instability. His wolf stirred at implied threats against chosen mate, alpha instincts demanding protection through strength demonstration rather than diplomatic concession. Schedule individual meetings with each ambassador. I'll address their concerns personally. And Lady Alara's position? Remains unchanged. The declaration carried finality that ended debate. She will be queen regardless of outside pressures. Anyone uncomfortable with that reality may seek accommodations elsewhere. As Thorne departed with reluctant acceptance, Aldric returned to chambers where Alara stirred beneath silk coverlets. Morning light revealed concerns shadowing violet eyes that had heard enough conversation to understand implications. Having second thoughts about choosing the overlooked lady? She asked with forced lightness. Never. He joined her beside windows overlooking the courtyard where servants scurried with increased urgency. But we face challenges requiring careful navigation. Are you prepared for warfare disguised as diplomacy? Her chin lifted with determination that made his heart sing. For you? For us? I'll face whatever comes. The real battle was just beginning. Chapter 10. The Political Backlash. The ambassador from Westmarch arrived at precisely dawn's third hour, crimson cloak billowing behind him like battle standard as he strode through corridors lined with kingdom banners. Lord Garrett Blackstone's reputation preceded him, veteran negotiator who had brokered 3 major peace treaties and crushed 2 rebellions through diplomatic maneuvering rather than military action. Aldric received him in the formal throne room, the crown positioned deliberately to remind visitors of hierarchical realities despite current political disadvantages. The morning's correspondence had revealed additional complications beyond Thorne's initial report. Grain shipments delayed indefinitely, fishing rights disputed, border patrols increased to ensure regional stability against unpredictable leadership. Your Majesty, Blackstone began without customary pleasantries, producing sealed documents bearing royal seals from multiple kingdoms. These represent formal complaints regarding yesterday's diplomatic catastrophe. King Roderick's daughter was publicly humiliated before international witnesses. Compensation must be substantial. Define substantial. Aldric kept his voice level despite Wolf snarling at implied criticism of mate selection. Territorial concessions along disputed border regions, exclusive trading rights for Westmarch merchants, marriage alliance with your chosen queen's younger sister to salvage some political benefit from this disaster. Each demand cut deeper than sword thrusts, designed to weaken his kingdom's position while extracting maximum advantage from perceived vulnerability. The neighboring rulers sensed blood in water, circling like sharks around wounded prey they believed could be bullied into submission. Alternatively, Blackstone continued with a predatory smile, King Roderick remains willing to overlook this insult if you reconsider your hasty decision. Princess Margaret understands political necessity and harbors no personal grudges against momentary lapses in judgment. Momentary lapse. The words emerged with temperature dropping several degrees. You refer to my claiming of my destined mate as a political miscalculation. I refer to choosing personal gratification over kingdom welfare as behavior concerning to allied nations who depend upon stable leadership for regional security. Blackstone's confidence suggested coordination between kingdoms that went beyond individual grievances. Through ornate windows, Aldric glimpsed Alara walking garden paths with quiet dignity, despite knowing conversations like this were happening throughout the castle. Her strength in facing political storms she hadn't created impressed him more than years of diplomatic training could have achieved. "Tell your king," Aldric said finally, "that the northern kingdoms do not negotiate from positions of intimidation." His daughter was not humiliated. She simply wasn't chosen. If he interprets royal prerogative as personal insult, perhaps his diplomatic education requires supplementation. Blackstone's expression hardened. "Your Majesty may find isolation costly when winter brings challenges requiring neighborly cooperation. We survived winters before your king was born. We'll survive whatever political tantrums he throws because I chose love over his convenience." As the ambassador departed with threats disguised as diplomatic protocol, Aldric realized the siege had begun. Not military assault, but economic and political pressure designed to force submission through starvation rather than sword. The question remained whether his kingdom's strength could outlast their enemies' patience. Chapter 11. The Midpoint Revelation. 3 weeks of escalating pressure had transformed daily existence into careful navigation through political minefield, where every decision carried potential for devastating explosion. Trade routes closed mysteriously, grain shipments suffered repeated delays, and border incidents increased with suspicious frequency. The message was clear: abandon the unsuitable queen, or watch the kingdom suffer. Aldric reviewed intelligence reports by candlelight, seeking patterns in seemingly random difficulties plaguing his realm. Captain Hayes spread documents across the war room table, highlighting connections that painted a disturbing picture of coordinated assault against royal authority. "The timing is too precise for coincidence," Hayes observed, pointing to marked locations on detailed maps. "Every incident occurs exactly when maximum damage to our interests is guaranteed. Someone with intimate knowledge of our trade schedules and diplomatic agreements orchestrates this campaign. Inside knowledge suggests inside assistance." The implications churned his stomach with betrayal's bitter taste. How many of our own nobles support this pressure? Difficult to determine without accusation, but Lord Marcus has been notably absent from court functions since the festival. Lady Vivian's father has requested extended leave to visit family estates. Several minor lords cite illness preventing attendance at recent council meetings. A conspiracy, then, homegrown treachery masquerading as concerned loyalty. Nobles who preferred malleable foreign princess to strong-minded local women willing to challenge established order. The pattern crystallized with sickening clarity. Remove Alara through external pressure while maintaining plausible deniability about internal involvement. "Sir, there's more." Hayes's expression darkened further. Intercepted correspondence suggests active planning beyond economic harassment. References to permanent solutions and eliminating obstacles appear repeatedly in coded messages between kingdoms. Ice flooded Aldric's veins as full scope of danger became apparent. They weren't merely pressuring political reversal, they were planning Alara's assassination. The woman he loved faced death because enemies viewed her existence as an impediment to their schemes. "Double her guard immediately," he commanded, alpha fury burning through careful control. "No one approaches without my explicit permission. Increase security for all entrances, inspect every delivery. Question every visitor regardless of stated purpose." "Already done, sir, but we have another problem." Hayes hesitated before continuing. "The foreign kingdoms are demanding formal response to their proposals by month's end. Failure to comply will trigger united action against our sovereignty." "What kind of action?" "Military alliance. Combined forces sufficient to siege Raven's Hollow indefinitely while blockading all trade routes. Economic strangulation followed by conquest if necessary." The choice crystallized with brutal clarity. Abandon Alara to save the kingdom, or watch everything his ancestors built crumble in defense of personal happiness. Every lesson about royal duty demanded sacrifice of individual desires for greater good. But something deeper than training, stronger than political wisdom, roared defiance against such surrender. His mate would not be sacrificed to appease ambitious neighbors and treacherous nobles. "Send word to all allied kingdoms," Aldric declared. "If they want war over our choice of queen, they shall have it." The die was cast. Love would be defended with steel if necessary. Chapter 12. The Line Drawn. The throne room had witnessed many moments of historical significance, but none carried weight equal to the assembly Aldric convened at midday's peak when summer sun blazed through stained glass windows depicting kingdom victories across the centuries. Every noble family within 3 days' ride attended, understanding that absence would be interpreted as treason during a crisis requiring absolute unity. Ilara sat beside his throne in a specially crafted chair that declared her position without formal coronation, a violet gown chosen deliberately to contrast with the crimson and gold that dominated court fashion. Her presence had become a statement of defiance against those who sought her removal through pressure and intimidation. "Lords and ladies of the northern kingdoms," Aldric began with a voice that commanded absolute attention. "Recent weeks have revealed conspiracy against crown authority that threatens our sovereignty. External enemies coordinate with internal traitors to dictate royal policy through extortion disguised as diplomacy." Murmurs rippled through assembled nobles as accusations landed with precision designed to separate loyal subjects from potential conspirators. Several faces paled noticeably, guilt written across features that couldn't maintain innocent expressions under royal scrutiny. Evidence collected by Crown Intelligence reveals a systematic campaign to undermine our kingdom's stability through economic harassment and political manipulation. Trade disruptions, border incidents, diplomatic pressure, all orchestrated to force abandonment of lawful royal prerogatives regarding marriage and succession. Lord Marcus shifted uncomfortably near the hall's rear, sweat beading despite cool autumn air filtering through open windows. Lady Vivian's father studied floor tiles with suspicious intensity, while other potential conspirators avoided direct eye contact with their sovereign. "Furthermore," Aldric continued with tone promising consequence, "intercepted correspondence reveals planning that extends beyond political pressure to physical elimination of our chosen queen. Assassination attempts have been discussed, planned, and approved by foreign kingdoms with domestic support." Gasps echoed through stone corridors as full scope of treachery became apparent to loyal nobles who had supported their king throughout 7 years of successful rule. The revelation that some among them actively conspired with enemy nations to murder royal consorts crossed lines that transformed political disagreement into capital offense. "Such treason demands response proportional to its severity." Steel rang as he drew ancient ceremonial sword passed down through generations of monarchs. Lord Marcus Blackwood approached the throne. The beta's legs trembled as he stepped forward, face ashen with knowledge that his cruel entertainment at the festival had evolved into participation in assassination conspiracy. Guards moved to flank him as evidence of his communications with enemy agents was read aloud for all witnesses. "The penalty for treason against crown and realm is death." The blade's edge caught torchlight like captured lightning. "However, mercy may be granted to those who provide complete confession and assistance in identifying remaining conspirators." Marcus collapsed to his knees, terror overwhelming whatever dignity his position had provided. "Your Majesty, I never intended—" "Confession, now, or join your foreign allies in whatever afterlife awaits traitors." Names spilled forth like water through a broken dam as survival instinct overcame loyalty to co-conspirators. Chapter 13. The rebellion begins. Dawn's light revealed armies on the horizon like storm clouds gathering strength before unleashing destruction upon everything standing in their path. 3 kingdoms had honored their threats with military precision, banners flying proudly above columns of steel-clad warriors who marched with confidence born from superior numbers and coordinated strategy. Aldric stood atop Ravenshollow's highest tower, spyglass revealing details that confirmed his worst fears about the scope of opposition arrayed against them. 15,000 troops at minimum, siege engines glinting in morning sun, supply trains stretching beyond visibility. Preparation that spoke of months spent planning this moment. King Roderick leads the center, Captain Hayes reported while studying enemy positions through his own glass. Prince Matthias commands the eastern flank. Emperor Valdris personally directs western approach. They've divided the command to prevent a single point of failure. Clever. Aldric lowered his spyglass with grim appreciation for enemies who had learned from previous military failures. Coordination suggests unified command despite separate kingdoms. Someone orchestrates this alliance. The ultimatum arrived with Dawn Messenger, Hayes continued, producing sealed parchment bearing 3 royal seals pressed into crimson wax. Standard terms: surrender the unsuitable queen, accept an approved marriage alliance, provide territorial concessions as compensation for their troubles. Or, complete siege until compliance or conquest. They believe our position is untenable without foreign trade or allied support. Below in the courtyard, Alara supervised distribution of supplies to castle defenders, her calm presence inspiring confidence among guards who faced overwhelming odds for women they'd barely known existed weeks earlier. Her transformation from overlooked noble to beloved queen had been remarkable, earning loyalty through actions rather than demanding it through title alone. "What are our numbers?" Aldric asked, though he suspected answers would provide little comfort. 4,000 trained warriors, 2,000 militia with varying experience, 500 castle staff capable of basic defense. Adequate for normal threats, insufficient for prolonged siege against professional armies. The mathematics were brutal but undeniable. Traditional military wisdom suggested immediate surrender or negotiation from weakness, preserving what could be saved rather than losing everything in hopeless struggle. Every strategic manual recommended avoiding battles where victory seemed impossible. Yet something deeper than tactical consideration burned through his chest like forge fire. These enemies sought to dictate royal marriage through violence, treating kingdom sovereignty as a negotiable commodity they could manipulate through force. Accepting their demands would establish precedent that invited future interference whenever his choices displeased neighboring powers. "Send reply to their ultimatum," he commanded with a voice carrying absolute resolve. "The northern kingdoms do not negotiate under duress. If they want our queen, they can try taking her through strength of arms." "Your Majesty," Hayes said carefully, "perhaps diplomatic solution would establish that threatening my mate brings concessions rather than consequences." His wolf snarled approval at a defiant stance. "They chose warfare over respect. Let them discover what that choice costs. War, then, against impossible odds for love's sake. History would judge whether courage or foolishness motivated such a decision." Chapter 14. The Ultimatum. The great throne room had been transformed into a war council chamber where maps replaced tapestries and weapon racks stood beside ceremonial decorations, symbols of royal authority adapted to serve military necessity during the siege that entered its second week. Aldric studied defensive positions, while runners brought hourly reports from wall guards monitoring enemy movements. His advisors gathered around the planning table, bore expressions ranging from determined loyalty to barely concealed desperation as reality of their situation became clearer with each passing day. Food stores would last perhaps 2 months under strict rationing. Water remained adequate, though vulnerable to contamination. Ammunition for siege engines was already running dangerously low. "They're building additional siege towers," Lord Commander Garrett reported with professional calm that couldn't quite mask underlying concern. Estimates suggest assault preparation within days rather than weeks. They grow impatient with waiting for starvation to achieve their goals. "Let them come." Aldric's response carried confidence he didn't entirely feel, bravado necessary to maintain morale among defenders who looked to their king for strength during impossible circumstances. "Our walls have withstood sieges for 3 centuries. Stone doesn't yield to foreign arrogance." "Your Majesty?" Chancellor Thorne interrupted with news that had drained color from his aged features. Delegation approaches under parley flags. Your own lords request immediate audience regarding urgent matters affecting kingdom survival. Betrayal's bitter taste flooded his mouth as implications became clear. Internal pressure now joined external siege. Nobles who had sworn loyalty, questioning royal decisions that threatened everything they held dear. The conspiracy had evolved beyond foreign manipulation to include domestic rebellion against leadership they viewed as dangerously compromised by emotional attachment. Admit them. If confrontation was inevitable, better to face it directly rather than allowing whispered dissent to poison remaining loyalty. But ensure Alara remains safely guarded during discussions. I trust nothing about this situation. Moments later, a dozen of his most influential lords entered with faces bearing a mixture of desperation and determination that spoke of decisions already made regardless of royal preferences. Lord Ashford led the group, his daughter Vivian's disappointed hopes still burning behind eyes that had once sparkled with ambition. "Your Majesty," Ashford began with a voice trembling between respect and barely controlled frustration. "We come as loyal subjects concerned for kingdom welfare during a crisis that threatens everything our families have built across generations. Speak freely." The invitation carried dangerous undertones that suggested freedom might prove costly. "The siege grows stronger daily while our position weakens. Food shortages will begin soon. Morale declines among common folk who suffer for conflicts they didn't choose. Our military faces odds that make victory virtually impossible." Each word fell like stone into silence. Meanwhile, a solution remains available through reasonable compromise. Define reasonable. Though he suspected the answer would prove anything but. Release Lady Alara from marriage obligations. Accept Princess Margaret of Westmarch as queen consort. Provide territorial concessions as compensation for diplomatic difficulties. The armies withdraw, trade resumes, and the kingdom prospers under arrangements serving everyone's interests. Everyone except my mate. "Your Majesty, personal preferences cannot supersede responsibilities to thousands of subjects whose lives depend upon wise leadership, making difficult decisions for greater good." The words echoed lessons drilled into him since childhood: duty above desire, kingdom before self. Crown's weight measured in sacrifices that proved worthiness to rule. Every principle of kingship demanded Alara's sacrifice to preserve what his ancestors had built. "And if I refuse?" Ashford's expression hardened with resolve that spoke of preparations extending beyond mere advice. "Then we must consider alternative arrangements for kingdom leadership during a period of obvious instability. Rebellion then, open and direct." The lines were drawn at last. Chapter 15. The Declaration of War. The cold steel of his ancestor's blade felt strangely comforting in Aldric's grip as he faced nobles whose loyalty had crumbled beneath pressure of siege and self-interest. 7 years of successful rule, of building prosperity and maintaining peace, meant nothing when personal choices threatened their comfortable existence. They would remove him to save themselves if necessary. Alternative arrangements? His voice carried a deadly quiet that made several lords step backward despite superior numbers. "You speak of deposing your rightful king because he chose love over political convenience? We speak of preventing kingdom destruction through a leader whose judgment has been compromised by emotional attachment," Lord Ashford replied with courage born from desperation. "The throne requires an occupant capable of making rational decisions based on strategic necessity rather than personal desire." "And who would provide such leadership?" Aldric asked, though shadows behind their eyes already suggested answers that would taste like betrayal. "Perhaps Prince Matthias, after he conquers what his diplomacy couldn't claim? Or Emperor Valdris, who has long coveted our mineral resources? Prince Marcus of Westmarch has expressed willingness to assume temporary guardianship of kingdom interests until suitable permanent arrangements can be negotiated," Ashford admitted with words that fell like funeral shrouds across any remaining illusion of loyalty. Foreign puppet, then, installed to rule through policies dictated by enemies who preferred conquest, through treachery rather than honest warfare. His own nobles would sell sovereignty to preserve their estates and titles under new management that served interests other than their own people's welfare. Would you trade independence for survival, honor for convenience, birthright for borrowed time under foreign masters? Each accusation struck like physical blows against men who had sworn sacred oaths of fealty. What becomes of the kingdom when your puppet ruler serves his true master's interests above ours? Better survival under temporary foreign influence than destruction defending an impossible position, another lord muttered, echoing sentiments that had clearly been discussed extensively before this confrontation. Through the windows, sounds of siege engines echoed across stone walls as enemies prepared a final assault against defenses weakened by internal division. Soon, walls would matter less than unity of purpose among defenders willing to fight for something beyond mere survival. Then we have nothing further to discuss. Aldric's decision crystallized with clarity that cut through political complexity, like sword through silk. Those who wish to surrender may leave through gates and join our enemies. Those who remember oaths of loyalty may remain and fight for honor that cannot be negotiated away. Your Majesty, choose. The word carried the finality of an avalanche beginning its descent down a mountainside. Loyalty or betrayal, honor or survival, your queen or their convenience. As several lords departed with muttered excuses about family obligations and strategic withdrawals, Aldric felt the kingdom fracture along lines of principle that would determine whether any victory could be meaningful. But those who remained, fewer though they were, stood straighter with decisions made. They would fight impossible odds for love's right to triumph over politics. War it would be then, against enemies both foreign and domestic. His hand found Alara's, and that touch made every sacrifice worthwhile. Chapter 16. The Battle Lost. The sound of splintering wood echoed through stone corridors as siege engines finally breached Raven's outer walls. 3 centuries of defensive architecture crumbling beneath coordinated assault that had pressed relentlessly for 18 days. Aldric fought beside his remaining loyal guards on battlements slick with blood and rain, sword finding enemy flesh with desperate precision of man protecting everything that mattered. But numbers told their inevitable story with mathematical certainty that no amount of courage could overcome. For every enemy warrior that fell beneath northern steel, 3 more took his place from reserves that seemed endless. The castle's defenders had fought magnificently, but magnificence couldn't multiply their forces or replenish ammunition that ran dangerously low. "Fall back to Inner Keep!" Aldric shouted over din of battle, directing strategic withdrawal that might preserve the core of resistance for a final desperate stand. "Save who you can!" Captain Hayes appeared at his side, armor dented and bloodied from morning's fighting, expression grim with news that would end any remaining hope of military victory. "Your Majesty, the Eastern Tower has fallen. They're inside the castle proper, maybe 30 minutes before they reach the royal chambers." The end approached with inexorable certainty of winter's advance, defeat written in smoke and flame that consumed everything his family had built across generations. Yet somehow, facing the ultimate consequence of choosing love over political wisdom, Aldric felt no regret for decisions that had led to this moment. Alara? Her safety remained paramount even as the kingdom crumbled around them. Secured in the tower sanctuary with the Queen's Guard. They'll hold as long as possible, but... Hayes's voice trailed off rather than speak of the inevitable conclusion aloud. Through gaps in stone walls, enemy banners advanced across courtyards where he had played as a child, trained as a young man, and ruled as king. Soon, foreign boots would walk halls where his ancestors had dispensed justice and protected their people through centuries of challenge. History ended here unless miracles intervened. "Sir!" The young messenger arrived breathless with news that drained what little hope remained. "Lord Commander reports General Blackwood's forces have switched sides. They're attacking our rear positions in coordination with siege assault." Betrayal completed the destruction that siege had begun, trusted officers choosing survival over honor when defeat became apparent. The kingdom's military leadership had fractured along lines of loyalty that revealed how thoroughly conspiracy had penetrated every level of authority. "How many remain loyal?" Aldric asked, though answers would change nothing about choices ahead. "Perhaps 200 effective fighters scattered throughout Keep. Most guards stayed at their posts despite odds. They're good men, sir. Good men dying for a king who had chosen personal happiness over strategic necessity. Their sacrifice weighed heavily on the soul already burdened by consequences of decisions that seemed so clear in moments of passion but so costly in reality of political consequence. As enemy warriors breached the inner courtyard and began an assault on the keep itself, Aldric realized the time for fighting was ending. Soon, only surrender or death would remain as options for the monarch whose love had cost his kingdom its independence. But love itself remained undiminished, despite price demanded by enemies who valued power over principle. Chapter 17. The Betrayal. The heavy oak doors of the throne room shuddered beneath enemy axes as Aldric made final preparations for inevitable capture, destroying sensitive documents and ensuring royal regalia couldn't be used to legitimize foreign rule. His sword lay beside the empty throne where the crown had rested through 7 years of peaceful governance that now seemed like a distant dream. "Your Majesty." The voice belonged to Sir Roland Thorne, his most trusted general and childhood companion, but the tone carried an unfamiliar coldness that made Aldric's blood freeze in recognition of approaching treachery. "Perhaps it's time to consider terms." "Terms?" Aldric turned slowly, hand instinctively moving toward sword hilt as a pattern of betrayal that had defined recent weeks prepared to reach its culmination. "What terms do you suggest for a kingdom that fought rather than surrendered its sovereignty?" "Terms that preserve what can be saved." Roland's expression held a mixture of regret and determination that spoke of difficult decisions already made. "Your position has become untenable. Continuing resistance serves no purpose except additional bloodshed among people who never chose this conflict." Behind Roland, other figures emerged from shadows, officers Aldric had promoted, nobles who had sworn renewed loyalty after Marcus's exposure, even servants who had served faithfully for years. Each face reflected the same combination of guilt and resolve, suggesting conspiracy that extended far beyond individual weakness. "You would abandon your oaths now?" The question carried more curiosity than anger, defeat having numbed emotional responses to levels where betrayal felt almost inevitable. "We honor different oaths," replied Lady Catherine Ashworth, whose husband had died defending Aldric's father during the Northern Wars. Oaths to preserve kingdom and people rather than serve individual desires that threaten their welfare. Our king chose personal gratification over responsibility to subjects who depend upon wise leadership, added Lord Garrett Blackstone, cousin to the ambassador who had delivered the original ultimatum. Such choices have consequences that extend beyond royal chambers. Each accusation struck with precision of arguments rehearsed through long nights of conspiracy, justifications carefully crafted to transform betrayal into patriotic duty. They had convinced themselves that removing him served greater good, salvation through treachery disguised as a difficult but necessary decision. And what becomes of my queen? The question mattered more than his own fate, love surviving even total defeat of everything else he had fought to protect. "Lady Alara will be treated with respect due her previous status," Roland assured with a tone suggesting mercy that came at a terrible price. "Prince Marcus has expressed willingness to provide a generous settlement, allowing her comfortable retirement to estates far from political center. Exile, then, for the crime of accepting my proposal. Protection from consequences of association with failed leadership. The euphemism couldn't disguise cruelty beneath diplomatic language. She will live, which is more than enemies originally planned." Through broken windows, sounds of final resistance echoed from the tower, where Alara waited under guard that might already have switched allegiance to preserve their own lives. His brave queen faced captivity among men who viewed her existence as political inconvenience requiring removal from power's center. "Sir," Roland continued with a voice carrying genuine regret despite circumstances, "your choices led to this moment. accept responsibility, acknowledge wisdom of ending resistance, and perhaps terms can be negotiated that preserve dignity for all involved. The final betrayal had arrived, delivered by those he trusted most. But even facing total defeat, Aldric felt no regret for choosing love over expedience. Some things mattered more than survival. Chapter 18. The Dark Night. The tower cell afforded a perfect view of the courtyard where foreign banners now flew beside conquered castle walls, enemy soldiers celebrating victory with wine looted from royal cellars, while smoke still rose from buildings damaged during final assault. 3 days of captivity had provided abundant time for reflection on choices that led to the kingdom's downfall, and everything he had lost pursuing love over duty. Chains bound his wrists to prevent escape attempts, though escape seemed pointless when Alara remained prisoner somewhere in this same castle, probably facing threats and pressures designed to break spirits stronger than iron shackles. Her welfare consumed his thoughts during endless hours when sleep brought no respite from guilt and self-recrimination. The door opened with a grinding protest that announced visitors whose identity carried implications for whatever negotiations had been conducted regarding their fates. Prince Marcus of Westmarch entered with satisfaction barely concealed beneath diplomatic courtesy, Victor surveying spoils won through patience and political manipulation rather than battlefield prowess. "Your former majesty," Marcus began with mockery disguised as respectful address. "I trust accommodations meet standards appropriate for fallen monarchs who chose poorly when offered reasonable alternatives." "Where is my queen?" Aldric's voice carried none of the submission Marcus probably expected, royal dignity intact despite circumstances that had stripped away everything except core identity, built on principles that transcended political power. "Lady Alara enjoys quarters suitable for women whose romantic notions contributed to considerable bloodshed and suffering." Marcus's smile carried cruelty that promised worse treatment than mere imprisonment. "She remains uncooperative regarding reasonable suggestions for resolving her complicated position. What do you want from her?" "Public acknowledgement that your marriage was illegitimate, obtained through coercion and political pressure rather than genuine affection. Formal request for annulment based on incompatibility and mutual recognition of mistake. Her voluntary retirement to remote estates, where future romantic entanglements cannot threaten regional stability." Each demand struck like a blade through heart, systematic destruction of everything they had built together through love that transcended political calculation. Marcus sought to erase their bond through legal technicalities that would legitimize conquest, while portraying resistance as emotional instability requiring correction. And if she refuses? Accidents happen to former queens who maintain dangerous delusions about status that no longer exist. The threat carried casual certainty that made clear how thoroughly Marcus controlled the current situation. Medical complications, hunting mishaps, falls from great heights. Widowhood often resolves complex political situations more efficiently than prolonged negotiations. Horror flooded through Aldric's consciousness as full scope of enemy planning became apparent. They would murder Alara if she wouldn't cooperate with fiction that justified their actions, covering assassination with explanations that preserved their reputations while eliminating inconvenient witnesses to illegal conquest. However, Marcus continued with false magnanimity, such unfortunate outcomes become unnecessary if reasonable people make reasonable choices about accepting new realities. Your cooperation might influence her treatment considerably. My cooperation with what? Public confession that emotional instability led to poor decisions threatening kingdom welfare. Formal abdication, recognizing incompetence to rule effectively. Endorsement of my temporary guardianship as a necessary measure protecting regional stability until permanent arrangements can be established. Legitimacy through false confession. Conquest disguised as intervention. Murder avoided through his submission to lies that would destroy reputation while preserving Alara's life. The choice crystallized with brutal clarity. Honor or love, truth or survival, principle or compromise. In the darkness of defeat, only one thing mattered more than everything else combined. Chapter 19. The revelation. The sound of fighting echoed through stone corridors with intensity that suggested something far different from routine suppression of scattered resistance. Aldric pressed against the cell window to observe courtyard chaos, where Marcus's soldiers battled unknown forces that had somehow breached castle defenses during pre-dawn darkness when vigilance traditionally relaxed. "By all the gods," he whispered, as familiar banners became visible through morning mist, symbols that represented hope he had abandoned during the darkest hours of captivity and despair. The mountain clans, ancient alliances forged through his grandfather's diplomatic wisdom, had survived political catastrophe. Tribal warriors descending from highland strongholds to honor blood debts that transcended current circumstances. Chiefs who had sworn loyalty to his bloodline rather than his crown now fought to restore the rightful king, despite odds that would daunt professional armies. The cell door burst open as Captain Hayes appeared with dozens of loyal guards whose faces bore a mixture of exhaustion and fierce determination that spoke of desperate fighting through castle corridors. Keys rattled against shackles as bonds that had held him for 3 days finally fell away. "Your Majesty," Hayes panted between gasps for breath. "The mountain clans arrived at dawn with 5,000 warriors. Chief Ironbeard sends word that oaths sworn to your grandfather remain sacred regardless of recent difficulties. They've broken the siege and scattered enemy forces throughout the valley." Freedom tasted sweeter than finest wine, as Aldric stretched muscles cramped by confinement, royal authority returning with strength that chains could bind but never break. The kingdom might be conquered, but legitimate rule survived in the hearts of those who honored loyalty above convenience. Alara? Her name carried everything: love, fear, desperate need to know she had survived whatever pressures Marcus had applied during captivity, designed to break spirits through isolation and threats. Secured in Tower Sanctuary, where Queen's Guard held position despite impossible odds. She's alive, sir. Wounded, but defiant. Pride colored Hayes's voice as he described a woman whose courage had inspired defenders long after hope seemed lost. She never wavered, never compromised, never gave them anything they demanded. Relief flooded through him like spring thaw after endless winter, mate bond singing with joy at news that she had survived trial by fire that would have broken lesser souls. Whatever physical wounds she had suffered would heal, but spirit that refused surrender despite torture promised strength for challenges ahead. Enemy positions? Tactical considerations returned with leadership responsibilities that captivity couldn't eliminate. Scattered and retreating. Marcus fled with core supporters when clan warriors breached outer defenses. Most foreign troops surrendered rather than face Highland steel in close combat. The castle is ours again. Through windows, smoking ruins of siege engines marked the battlefield where superior numbers had been overcome by fierce loyalty that recognized no master except the rightful king. Victory snatched from defeat by allies whose honor exceeded political calculation, salvation through bonds stronger than marriage treaties or territorial agreements. "Gather remaining loyal forces," Aldric commanded with voice carrying authority that 3 days of imprisonment couldn't diminish. "We have a kingdom to reclaim and enemies to pursue. They chose warfare over negotiation. Let them discover consequences of underestimating mountain justice." The darkest night was ending. Dawn brought possibilities for rebuilding what love had nearly cost, strength discovered through vulnerability that transformed weakness into power. His queen awaited reunion that would prove some bonds couldn't be broken by any force their enemies possessed. Chapter 20. Gathering Allies. The war room had been hastily restored from enemy occupation, maps replaced and strategic materials recovered from hiding places where loyal servants had preserved the kingdom's military secrets during a brief period of foreign control. Chief Ironbeard dominated the chamber's center, a massive frame adorned with battle trophies that spoke of a lifetime spent defending mountain territories against all invaders. "Your Majesty," the clan leader rumbled with a voice like distant thunder, "debts of honor transcend political convenience. Your grandfather saved my father's life during the Frozen Valley campaign. Such obligations pass through generations regardless of current difficulties." Beside him stood representatives from 6 other Highland clans, warriors whose allegiance operated according to codes that valued personal loyalty over diplomatic treaties. They had marched through treacherous mountain passes during winter storms, because oaths sworn in blood demanded nothing less than complete commitment when the rightful king required assistance. The Valley clans also remember kindness shown during plague years, added Chief Ravenhawk, whose tribal lands controlled crucial supply routes between kingdoms. Medical supplies provided without expectation of political reward created bonds that foreign gold cannot break. We fight not for the crown, but for man who showed compassion when others offered only indifference. Each declaration strengthened Aldric's position beyond mere military reinforcement, establishing legitimacy that rested on character rather than conquest. These alliances had been built through years of patient relationship building, small kindnesses, and mutual respect that created a foundation stronger than any political arrangement. "What of my treacherous nobles?" he asked. Though clan justice typically provided clear answers to questions about betrayal and its consequences. Lord Ashford and his conspirators fled eastward with Marcus's retreating forces. Captain Hayes reported with satisfaction that suggested pursuit would be swift and merciless. Several were captured during evacuation attempts. They await your pleasure regarding appropriate punishment for treason. And neighboring kingdoms? West March forces scattered when mountain warriors appeared. King Roderick apparently had little stomach for fighting Highland clans in addition to castle defenders. Emperor Valdris withdrew to reassess strategy after the diplomatic solution became a military catastrophe. Prince Matthias holds defensive positions, but shows no inclination for continued aggression. Victory had shattered an enemy alliance that seemed invincible when built on political calculation, rather than genuine commitment to shared goals. Foreign kings discovered that mercenary motives couldn't sustain armies when casualties mounted beyond acceptable levels for campaigns serving others' interests, rather than vital national concerns. "Chief Ironbeard," Aldric said formally, "your intervention saved my kingdom and queen. What payment do your people require for such service?" "Payment?" The clan leader's laughter boomed through stone corridors like a celebration of ancient victory. "Honor needs no payment beyond recognition that debts have been satisfied. Your grandfather's kindness is repaid through your restoration. Balance is maintained." However, Chief Ravenhawk added with practical consideration, continued cooperation might benefit all parties. Trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, cultural exchange that strengthens bonds between mountain and valley peoples. Alliance built on respect rather than necessity. The offer represented an opportunity to forge relationships that would endure beyond the current crisis, partnerships based on shared values rather than temporary convenience. His kingdom needed such allies more than diplomatic marriages that could be dissolved when political winds shifted direction. "Agreed," Aldric declared, understanding that true strength came from loyalty freely given rather than obligation reluctantly accepted. Mountain clans and northern kingdoms shall prosper together. Now to reclaim his queen and complete victory that love had made possible. Chapter 21. The Final Charge. The siege of Prince Marcus's last stronghold stretched into its second week as winter winds howled across barren landscapes where enemy forces had retreated after abandoning hope of holding conquered territory. Ironhold Castle perched on an isolated mountain peak that commanded valley approaches, a defensive position that had withstood attacks for 2 centuries, but never faced combined assault by Highland clans fighting beside royal forces. Aldric studied siege positions through spyglass that revealed enemy desperation growing daily as supplies dwindled and morale collapsed among soldiers who had expected easy conquest rather than prolonged mountain warfare. Marcus's banners still flew defiantly above ancient walls, but intelligence reports suggested internal discussions about surrender terms had begun among officers who preferred negotiation to starvation. "They're running low on arrows," Chief Ironbeard observed while examining scratches that marked enemy volleys across siege equipment protected by Highland craftsmanship. "Another few days, and their defensive capabilities will be severely compromised." "Too long!" Aldric's impatience carried the weight of personal urgency that transcended military strategy. Every day, Marcus remains free. Other enemies have time to regroup and plan new attempts against the kingdom. We need decisive action. Direct assault remains costly against prepared positions, Captain Hayes warned with professional caution, earned through years of campaign experience. They still have the advantage of elevation and interior lines. Casualties could be severe even in victory. Through his spyglass, movement caught attention near the castle's main gate, where White Banner emerged from shadows, a parley flag that suggested enemy willingness to negotiate rather than fight to bitter end. Perhaps siege pressures had finally overcome Marcus's stubborn resistance to accepting defeat. "Herald approaches," called Lookout from an elevated position that commanded a broader view of battlefield terrain. Single rider under truce banners. The messenger arrived bearing terms that reflected desperation disguised as magnanimous offer. Marcus would surrender the castle and remaining forces in exchange for safe passage to distant kingdom, where exile could be lived in comfortable obscurity. No punishment for invasion, no accountability for the conquest attempt, no justice for those who had died defending legitimate rule. "Unacceptable," Aldric declared after reading a proposal that sought mercy without acknowledgement of crimes committed. "He invaded my kingdom, attempted to murder my queen, caused hundreds of deaths through unprovoked aggression. Justice demands answers, not a comfortable retirement." "Sir?" the herald ventured nervously. "Prince Marcus suggests alternative arrangements might be possible. Perhaps territorial concessions or payment of substantial reparations could satisfy royal concerns about accountability. The only concession I require is his surrender for trial on charges of treason, murder, and conspiracy against lawful authority." The response carried finality that ended negotiation before it could begin. He has until sunset to comply or face consequences of continued resistance. As the herald departed with an ultimatum that offered choice between justice and destruction, Aldric felt peace settle over his soul despite approaching battle. Some principles couldn't be compromised regardless of cost, honor demanding satisfaction that transcended tactical convenience. "Prepare assault," he commanded officers who waited for orders that would determine whether victory came through enemy wisdom or superior force. "At sunset, we finish this." One way or another, justice would be served before another day ended. The final charge would write the ending to a story that began with love and demanded satisfaction through honor's price. Chapter 22. The climax sunset painted the mountain peaks crimson as assault horns echoed across valley approaches, where combined forces of Highland clans and loyal kingdom troops advanced toward Ironhold Castle's ancient walls. The fortress had seemed impregnable from distance, but closer inspection revealed decades of neglect that left defensive positions vulnerable to coordinated attack by determined enemies. Aldric led from the front lines, royal banner streaming behind him as he guided his destrier toward breaches that siege engines had finally opened after days of relentless bombardment. The weight of the crown and sword felt lighter than they had in months, purpose and righteous anger combining to fuel strength that transcended individual limitations. "For the Queen!" he shouted as arrows whistled overhead, a rally cry taken up by hundreds of voices that transformed individual courage into collective force capable of overcoming any defensive position. The mate bond hummed with Alara's love and support despite distance separating them, connection that provided strength beyond physical capabilities. Highland warriors poured through broken walls with ferocity that made the enemy retreat immediate and decisive. Chief Ironbeard's massive battle-axe cleared courtyard paths, while clan berserkers pressed advantage that sent Marcus's remaining soldiers fleeing toward Inner Keep in desperate search for defensible positions. But retreat proved futile against enemies who had waited too long for justice to be satisfied by anything less than complete victory. Foreign mercenaries threw down weapons rather than face mountain steel in confined spaces. Surrender banners appearing from windows as organized resistance collapsed under pressure that proved impossible to withstand. "Marcus!" Aldric's voice echoed through stone corridors as he pursued the architect of the kingdom's suffering. toward the throne room where the enemy prince had established a temporary court during brief occupation. "Face me like the warrior you pretend to be." The final confrontation took place in a chamber where foreign banners had briefly replaced ancestral symbols, justice demanding personal accountability rather than delegated punishment for crimes that had nearly destroyed everything worth defending. Marcus waited with sword drawn but hands trembling, courage failing when faced with consequences of choices that had seemed so clever during planning stages. "Your Majesty," Marcus said with a voice that carried none of previous arrogance, "surely reasonable men can reach accommodation that serves mutual interests. War profits no one when peace offers benefits to all parties." "Peace?" The word tasted bitter like old wine. "You invaded my kingdom, threatened my people, attempted to murder my wife. What peace do you offer to families who lost sons defending homes you tried to steal?" "Political necessities sometimes require difficult choices," Marcus replied with justification that revealed complete lack of understanding about crimes he had committed. Regional stability demanded intervention when emotional decisions threatened broader welfare. Steel rang as blades met in combat that would determine whether justice or convenience would write history's final judgment about invasion disguised as diplomatic intervention. Marcus fought with skill, earned through years of training, but desperation could not overcome righteous fury that powered every strike aimed at ending the threat against love and loyalty. The fight ended when Marcus's sword shattered beneath a blow that carried the weight of mountain justice and royal authority combined. He knelt in defeat, crown rolling away across stone floor toward man who had earned right to rule through choices that valued principle over expedience. "Justice," Aldric declared as he stood over a defeated enemy who had learned too late that some bonds could not be broken by force or cunning. Victory belonged to love after all. Chapter 23. Falling Action. Part 1. The great hall of Raven's Hollow Castle buzzed with controlled activity as servants cleared debris from siege damage, while nobles who had remained loyal throughout the crisis worked to restore normal functions of government that had been disrupted by weeks of warfare and political upheaval. Foreign banners had been replaced by ancestral symbols, but scars remained that would require months to heal completely. Aldric sat on the restored throne, while scribes recorded testimony from captured conspirators whose confessions revealed the full scope of internal betrayal that had nearly succeeded in destroying kingdom independence. Each revelation painted a clearer picture of systematic corruption that extended far beyond simple political disagreement into active collaboration with enemy forces. Lord Ashford admits to providing strategic information about castle defenses, Captain Hayes reported while reviewing documents seized from enemy camps during their hasty retreat. Complete layouts, guard rotations, supply schedules, everything necessary for efficient siege planning was delivered months before actual invasion began. And Lady Vivian? Served as a courier between domestic conspirators and foreign agents. Her frequent visits to neighboring kingdoms weren't social calls, but planning sessions for coordinated assault on royal authority. Beauty disguised treason quite effectively. The extent of treachery left him shaken despite victory that had restored legitimate rule. People he had trusted completely, nobles whose families had served faithfully for generations, had sold kingdom secrets for promises of elevated position under foreign rule. Betrayal cut deeper than enemy swords because it came from those who should have been most loyal. What of Prince Marcus? Awaits trial for invasion, attempted regicide, and violation of diplomatic protocols. Mountain clans demand traditional justice that involves considerably more pain than standard execution. Chief Ironbeard has specific suggestions about appropriate punishment for those who threaten sacred bonds of marriage. Highland justice carried a reputation for creativity that made civilized execution seem merciful by comparison. Yet something deeper than vengeance demanded a more thoughtful approach to consequences that would establish precedent for future generations facing similar challenges. Schedule formal trial for month's end, Aldric decided after consideration of factors that transcended personal satisfaction. Let justice be seen to be done properly rather than appear motivated by revenge. Future kings may need precedent that demonstrates strength through law, rather than mere force. Through windows overlooking the courtyard, construction sounds echoed as skilled craftsmen repaired siege damage that had scarred centuries-old stonework. The castle would be stronger after repairs, lessons learned through conflict applied to defensive improvements that would discourage future attempts at conquest. "Sir," Hayes continued with news that carried personal significance beyond political implications, "the Queen requests audience when your schedule permits. She has been working with Highland chiefs on proposals for permanent alliance agreements that would formalize relationships established during the recent crisis." "My queen," speaking her title aloud, still filled him with wonder despite everything they had endured together. "Has she recovered from injuries sustained during captivity?" "Physical wounds are healing well, but she speaks little of what occurred during imprisonment. Whatever Marcus's people did to pressure cooperation, she never yielded. Her strength inspired everyone who witnessed it." Pride swelled through his chest at the description of a woman whose courage had sustained hope when defeat seemed certain. Chapter 24. Falling Action, Part 2, Resolution. 6 months after the siege that had tested their love against forces that seemed insurmountable, Queen Alara stood beside her husband on castle battlements, where they had shared so many quiet moments during courtship that felt like a lifetime ago. The valley stretched below them, green with spring growth that spoke of renewal after winter's hardships. The kingdom had not merely survived, but prospered under leadership that balanced strength with compassion, justice with mercy, traditional authority with innovations that served changing times. Highland alliances had brought fresh perspectives to governance, while trade agreements with mountain clans created prosperity that benefited all citizens, rather than merely noble families. "The Northern Institute sends excellent reports," Alara said, while reviewing correspondence from educational facilities they had established in partnership with clan chiefs who valued practical wisdom above theoretical knowledge. "Young people from 6 different kingdoms now study together, learning cooperation instead of competition." "Your idea," Aldric reminded her with affection that had only deepened through trials that might have destroyed relationships built on convenience rather than genuine connection. Education as foundation for lasting peace rather than temporary truces maintained through threat of force. The transformation extended beyond political arrangements to encompass personal growth that had made them better individuals as well as more effective rulers. Aldric's willingness to choose love over duty had taught him that true strength came from authentic relationships, rather than isolated authority, while Alara's courage under pressure had revealed leadership capabilities that enhanced their partnership. "Lord Thorne reports that neighboring kingdoms are requesting similar alliance agreements," she continued with satisfaction that reflected recognition of success that transcended their personal happiness. "They've discovered that cooperation produces better results than competition, mutual benefit rather than zero-sum calculations." Through the courtyard below, children played games that mixed Highland traditions with valley customs, cultural exchange creating new possibilities that honored heritage while embracing change. The future belonged to a generation that would inherit a kingdom transformed by choices made during a crisis that had demanded everything they possessed. "Marcus's trial concluded yesterday," Aldric noted with a voice that carried no satisfaction despite justice finally served. "Exile to a remote island where he can contemplate the consequences of choosing ambition over honor. Highland chiefs wanted more dramatic punishment, but mercy sometimes demonstrates strength more effectively than vengeance." "And our treacherous nobles?" "Stripped of titles, estates distributed to families who remained loyal throughout the siege. They may earn redemption through service, but trust requires demonstration rather than mere apology." The decision had been difficult but necessary, establishing standards that future generations would understand about loyalty's rewards and betrayal's costs. Evening brought them to private chambers where crowns could be set aside in favor of intimate connection that had started everything. The mate bond hummed contentment as they held each other close, political pressures temporarily forgotten in the sanctuary they had created together. "Regrets?" Alara asked with a smile that suggested she already knew the answer. "About choosing you over political convenience? Never." His response carried absolute certainty, earned through experiences that had tested every assumption about duty and desire. You were worth every battle, every risk, every consequence that choosing love demanded. Outside their windows, the kingdom slept peacefully under stars that had witnessed the transformation of an isolated king into a leader whose strength came from connection rather than distance. Love had indeed triumphed over politics, proving that some bonds could not be broken by any force that enemies possessed. Their story would inspire future generations facing similar choices between heart and duty, demonstrating that true leaders were those brave enough to risk everything for what mattered most. The kingdom they would leave their children had been built on a foundation that valued authentic relationships over strategic arrangements, partnership over domination, shared responsibility over isolated authority. In choosing love, they had discovered strength neither could have achieved alone. And that strength would endure long after crowns passed to other hands, legacy written in hearts rather than history books. The Alpha King, who had learned to love, had become exactly the leader his people truly needed.